Hello, my fellow Trekkies, and welcome to another episode of the Trek Right channel. Today we're talking about the Hibbard class, which I see as an escort cruiser. I say escort because it has multiple phaser strips. Look at this. It's got the one that goes around, and let's see if I turn on the highlights, you'll see it better. And then it's got an extra one here, and the same thing underneath. It's got the one that goes around, and it's got an extra one located right here in the dark. Oh, I guess I can't grab it. But it's there, trust me, take my word on it. And it also has warp coil guns. Now, I mentioned warp coil guns when in the video for the Sarohawk. Is it the Sarohawk? No, the Yellow Jacket has a warp coil gun on it. And that's for dogfighting. What the purpose of the warp coil gun, if you watch the videos on the Sarohawk and the Yellow Jacket, the idea is that, well, now there are fighters that can attack you at warp speed because they can maneuver at warp speed, and with every new weapon has to come a new defense. If you're Starfleet and you're developing that fighter, you're going to develop something to combat it. Well, what do you do if you are Starfleet? You're building these fighters that are going to attack at warp, and you're going to need the ability to defend. You're going to need the ability to orbit a planet at orbital speeds and attack something that's coming at you at the speed of light. Well, combine the idea of warp coils and a railgun and came up with a basically a warp coil gun. And the projectile is a hyperdense projectile that has basically got a hyperdense core and surrounded by its own warp coils. So here's one of those projectiles. I actually drew them up. You're looking at it from the front here. You can see the center core and the warp coils, or what I imagine warp sustainers looking like, being basically reverse warp coils. And I can rotate around it here so you can see. I actually drew this up when I was putting together the Yellow Jacket because I wanted to know just how much ammunition I could fit in the Yellow Jacket. So I actually drew this system here where there's basically 3 of those barrels worth of rounds. And it moves a little slow because being a dummy like I am, instead of using just a generic shape the same size and making a couple thousand of those, I actually used the actual bullet with all the detail, which this is not, particularly high detail, but when you're making thousands of them, trust me, if I were to try to do anything more to show you in this video, other than navigate around like this, it gets pretty slow. So much like the warp sustainers that keep a photon torpedo going at warp speed, the barrels of these guns consist of warp coils. The warp coils create a warp field inside the barrel, and they throw that projectile out, and that projectile itself is basically a warp sustainer with a very heavy core. And that way you can actually target. And I wish this would do what it's supposed to. Oh, I know what's going on. It's supposed to rotate around whatever I've selected, and what I've selected is mirrored to the other side, so it's rotating around the middle. If I unmirror it, now it will rotate around the gun. Yes, I'm a genius. Took me how long to figure that out? So there you go. That's what I consider the warp coil gun, and it's got its ammunition barrels here. When it runs out, it would rotate straight up, and there would be doors down here in the bottom, which I didn't detail in, that would open up, and it would reject these magazines, and 4 new ones would go in its place. So it is armed to escort a carrier, whether at warp or at impulse speeds or at orbital speeds. And now I will get rid of that highlighting again, because with the highlighting on, you can see all these circles, which represents the various lights in the model. So where did I come up with the idea for this one? Well, it was a long time coming. I think this maybe was the 3rd attempt I made to build something based on the, you know what, the engines are missing on this ship. Where are the engines? There they are. Based on the P-38 Lightning of World War II fame. And finally came up with it. That was I'll throw in a picture here when I edit this together. So you can see it's the 2 twin booms and a middle fuselage. So that would be the middle fuselage right there. And really wasn't my intention, but quite organically, the saucer took this shape, which I really like. We've got the almond-shaped saucers, the pointed shape for main hulls, this oval, we got round, perfectly circular. But this one is more like a compressed on the x-axis wing off something like a P-38 Lightning. And so that worked out pretty well. And it has a shuttle bay, which may look like it was added as an aftereffect, because it was. In the last video for the Imahara, one of our fellow Trekkies commented that it was a great ship, but didn't have a shuttle bay. So I realized I'd made the same mistake on this one, and I added it real quick. It's got rear torpedo tubes. Front torpedo tubes are numerous. Zoom in here. Look at that. 6 forward torpedo tubes. There we go. Want to see inside the saucer? If I scroll up, look. The inside of the saucer. And otherwise, is named after Hibbard, one of the 2 designers of the P-38. And, other than that, there's not much to it. It's just a little design I like. Oh, this part here, this is not supposed to represent the tail of the P-38 going across the bottom. What that is a place for the warp conduits. There are some other ships that have a dual boom back end. And what you have when you have the 2 booms and the engines in the middle, you get into a situation where if your warp core is in the saucer up here, or in a centralized engineering, you're going to have to send that warp plasma off to each side, turn a 90-degree angle down the boom, which of course we know they do have ships that turn at a 90-degree angle, the Enterprise C. It looks great, but if you think about it, it's about as goofy as having the bridge on top where it can get shot. The idea that you would have this flowing warp plasma and go through all the effort of making it turn a 90-degree angle instead of just having the warp booms go straight up to the engines at some lesser sharp angle. So if you don't have this connection here, you have to send that warp plasma all the way along this boom and back. It's at least two 90-degree angles. And that just doesn't make any sense. So as much as I wanted to not have this piece, I added it because it was the logical thing to do. And funny enough, now that it's there, I can't imagine it not being there. Of course, I've been looking at this model for a year or more. And you tell me what you guys think down in the comments. Anyways, I will cut in a few shots of it flying by now, and that'll wrap up this episode of the Trek Right channel. Oh, you know what? It's also got phaser cannons, or as they call them now in Star Trek Online, lance phasers. Here's a question for you. I would reverse that. I like phaser lance. Tell me which one you like in the comments, and now I'm done. So have a great rest of the month. Until the next episode, live long and prosper, my friends.